The devil is in the details. How many times have we heard that? And it's true. You start a project or something and the details overwhelm you. I've been, like you, probably listening all my life to the parable of the prodigal son, which we just heard. And several years ago, I came upon a scripture scholar who really knew the Bible and knew the ancient languages and knew the customs of the people and heard the parable as Jesus' fellow countrymen would have heard it when he first gave it. And he brought some details out that had never even occurred to me. The first detail was, notice that the father was looking for his son afar off. He was looking at the far horizon, hoping that someday he would see him come home. He was yearning for his son to come home. And let us not forget who the father is in the parable. And then the next detail the man brought to my attention was the father ran to his son. As soon as he saw him, he ran to him. Now, if you've watched the evening news on television, you know that in places like Gaza or any other place in the Middle East, when people are out in the marketplace, you can see how they're dressed. And men there wear a long robe down to their ankles with long sleeves. It looks something like a priest's cassock. Can you imagine running in that? Now, the man said he had to pick up his skirts to run down the street to meet his son, thus revealing his, whatever he had on under his cassock, under his robe. In other words, he made a fool of himself in front of the whole town to run down the street to greet this son coming from a distance. And let's not forget who the father is. That is exactly what God did in coming to us in Jesus, didn't he? At the end of Lent, we'll have 3 days when we ponder God being made a fool of. Think of the Passion account. The crowning, the whipping, the spitting, all that. God subjected himself to our ridicule, made a fool of himself in order to get us back. And then the son says, I will go to my father and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against you. I am no... It sounds like an act of contrition, doesn't it? But he never even gets to say it. His father interrupts the act of contrition and throws his arms around him and embraces him. And then he says, let's party. My son is home. Let's not forget who the father is in the parable. The father is God, our Father. So those 3 details bring up an aspect of God's relationship to us, even in our sinfulness, especially in our sinfulness, that we need to remember. This gospel is always given to us on the middle Sunday of Lent. And I think the reason is because you remember how you started Lent, and maybe a day or two before you said to yourself, what am I going to do for Lent? And this gospel brings back the reality that in Lent, it's not what you do or I do, it's what God does in Lent. God extends his merciful love to us no matter what we've done or been or thought or said. He throws his arms around us, and this is exemplified, of course, by the outstretched arms of Christ at the end of the Lenten period. We say, what am I going to do for Lent? But the real question we have to ask ourselves is, what is God going to do for me this Lent? How will I be open enough to let him do with me what he wants? Which, of course, means getting in some kind of proximity to God through prayer, some silence, some thinking about me and God. Meditation, you can call that if you like. The big question is, will I permit God to embrace me this Lent?